It's a clash of titans in this rapid showdown. We have the legendary former world champion Vladimir Kramnik facing off against the tactical wizard Alexander Grischuk. Expect fireworks. Kramnik opens with pawn to c4, the English opening. Grischuk responds symmetrically, and we quickly get a four-knight setup, a solid classical structure where both players know all the ideas. The tension in the center breaks immediately with a pawn trade on d5. Both sides simply continue their development, bringing bishops out and preparing to control the key central squares. Now the maneuvering begins. Grischuk's knight hops to h5, provoking a trade of bishops on e3. After a quick shuffle of pieces, Grischuk tucks his king away safely by castling. The tension is palpable. Pieces are jockeying for position, with Grischuk's knight landing on the powerful b4 outpost. Kramnik responds by walking his king up to f2, a common idea in these structures. And here's the first critical moment. Kramnik lunges forward with the pawn to g4. This looks aggressive, but it's an inaccuracy that invites a tactical shot. A much safer path was simply rook to d1, consolidating his position. Instead, this pawn push allows black to pounce, and Grischuk doesn't hesitate for a second. The knight crashes into d3 with check, immediately punishing the pawn push. Kramnik's king is forced out into the open. He has no choice but to step to e2, where it becomes a target. Wow, a brilliant sacrifice. Grischuk plays knight to f4 with check. The point is to shatter white's kingside pawn cover. After the pawn takes, the other knight will recapture on f4 with another check, leaving the white king completely exposed, but Kramnik shows his class. He bravely takes the knight on f4. This is the only move that keeps white in the game, correctly calculating that he can weather the storm. After the fireworks, black recaptures on f4 with check, and the position settles. Both players now bring their queens and rooks into the fight, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Grischuk's adventurous knight grabs a pawn on h3 before dancing back to the f4 outpost. Meanwhile, Kramnik prepares on the queen side, pushing his pawn to a3. A slight inaccuracy from Grischuk. He plays the quiet pawn to c6. This lets white off the hook a little bit. The much stronger move was bishop to c4, putting immediate and severe pressure on white's exposed king. A couple of quiet moves follow, with Kramnik tucking his bishop back to c2 and Grischuk pushing his pawn forward to b5. And that's an error from Kramnik. King to f2 lets the advantage slip away completely. The engine preferred knight to e2, keeping control of key squares. Now, black can punish this with the pawn push to f6, seizing the initiative. Grischuk does indeed play pawn to f6, clamping down on the center. Kramnik follows with the recommended knight move to e2, but it's a step too late. Another missed chance. Grischuk plays pawn to g5, which is a good move, but not the best. The killer blow was to trade rooks on d1 first, simplifying into a position where black's advantage would be undeniable. White's queen swings over to c3 to create counterplay, and black pushes the pawn to a5, continuing the queenside pressure. And here, under immense pressure, Kramnik makes a serious mistake. He needed to find a way to diffuse the tension, and there was a path. The best try was trading rooks on d8. Then, after queen to a7 check, the king steps to f1, the rooks come off, and the knight takes on f4. But in the game, Kramnik pushes the pawn to b4, and this is a decisive error that gives Grischuk a winning position. Grischuk takes the pawn on b4. This is a very strong move, but amazingly, it's not the most precise. Trading rooks on d1 immediately would have been even more crushing for white, and what a great find from Kramnik. He recaptures with pawn takes pawn on b4, the only move to keep fighting. And here's the follow-up black needs to find. Queen to a7 check forces the issue. The king moves to e1, now rook takes rook on d1 is a check. And after bishop takes, black is still much better. The rooks are exchanged as black's rook takes the rook on d1, and another excellent choice from Kramnik. He recaptures with the bishop on d1, finding the absolute best defensive resource to stay in the game. Brilliant, just brilliant from Grischuk. He sacrifices the pawn with c5. The idea is to deflect white's queen. If the queen takes the pawn, it opens the door for a deadly knight fork on d3, a fantastic tactical shot. Kramnik ignores the bait and correctly captures the dangerous attacking knight on f4. Grischuk recaptures by taking the pawn on b4, but this is an inaccuracy. Taking back on f4 with his own pawn would have kept the attacking pressure at maximum. Here, Kramnik had a golden opportunity to muddy the waters and create serious complications for black. The engine screams for knight to d5. After bishop takes the knight, white's queen slides to e3, bishop to e6 follows, and bishop to b3 keeps the fight going. But in the actual game, Kramnik plays queen to b2, a passive move that allows black to consolidate and secure a winning advantage. Grischuk immediately cashes in with queen to c5 check. The king is forced to g2, and black simply recaptures the piece on f4. White's position is crumbling, but there was one defensive setup that offered more resistance. The best try was bishop to b3. After the bishops are traded, the queen recaptures with check, the king moves to g7, and the rook lifts to h3. Instead, we see the knight jumps to d4, but this just invites more trouble and allows black's attack to grow even stronger. A mutual error. Grischuk plays queen to e5, but he misses a complete knockout blow. The move bishop to c4 would have ended the game on the spot, a truly crushing shot. And this is the final decisive mistake. Kramnik is faced with a tough choice, and a solid defensive move was required. The best was rook to b3, defending against the threats. Even after bishop to c4, white can play bishop to e2, queen takes pawn on e4 check, and block with bishop to f3 to hang on. But Kramnik chose to be greedy, and queen takes the pawn on b4 is a blunder. This allows the very attack he just managed to avoid, and now black's position is completely overwhelming. And there it is. Grischuk unleashes the killer bishop to c4. This move coordinates all of black's pieces in a devastating attack against the hopelessly exposed white king. A desperate attempt to block. Kramnik throws his knight into the fray with knight to c6, but it's not enough. Grischuk is ruthless. He plays queen takes pawn on e4 with check, the most precise and powerful continuation of his winning attack. The sequence is forced. White must block with the bishop on f3, but black simply checks again from c2. An amazing defensive find from Kramnik in a lost position. King to h3 is the only move that doesn't get checkmated immediately. Incredible resistance. But the end is near. Black's pawn takes the rook on g3, tearing open the g-file and sealing white's fate. One last futile check from white. The knight hops to e7, but it's a final gasp. Grischuk plays king to f7. It's a tiny inaccuracy, as king to h8 was even simpler, but at this point any non-blunder wins the game. White's king captures the pawn on g3, while black's queen calmly slides to b3, preparing the final wave of the attack. And the final mistake. Queen to e1 allows black's last piece, the rook, to join the attack with decisive effect. And here comes the rook. Rook to e8 enters the game, and the position is completely hopeless for white. Kramnik makes one last move, queen to h1. But after the king takes the knight on e7, all threats are active and white is defenseless. Kramnik resigned, and Grischuk wins. A spectacular, complex battle filled with brilliant sacrifices, tough defense, and critical mistakes. A true heavyweight fight from start to finish.